Okay, we looked at mutations in our last lecture, and now I invite you to join me in this discussion about genetic disorders. So, when we were looking at mutations, we defined them that if there is a change in the DNA sequence, then that is a mutation. So if you think if that mutation is happening in a region of the DNA sequence, and because of that change, the person who incurs that change in his or her DNA then has an effect by suffering disease, then we can define that as a genetic disorder. The disease or the health challenge, the health problem that a person is encountering as a result of a change in their DNA sequence. Okay? So as we know, DNA is a set of instructions which tells our bodies how to grow, how to develop, and how to function. So whenever there is a change, whenever there is a mutation in the DNA, such a change can cause the body to work differently. And in some cases, that difference in the working might result in a disease. Okay? So whenever there is a change within the instructions that our body receives from DNA, such a change can lead to an abnormality in the phenotype. Such an abnormality can be as a result or can come as a form of a disease. Okay? So genetic disorders can happen in different ways. They can occur when they're inherited from parents. So if you have disorders which are being passed down from parents to children through the genes that the children are inheriting, then those indicates a way in which such disorders are occurring, are happening within the population. So in such a case, for the disorder to occur, for the disorder to be inherited, then it means that both parents should carry the changed gene or the mutated gene. So if both parents have that, both of them are carriers, for example, then it's likely that 1 out of 4 of their children, or a quarter of the children that they bring forth, might inherit both copies of the recessive allele that both parents carry. So when the child inherits both copies, one from each parent, both of them recessive copies, then the child suffers in return. Some genetic mutations can occur some genetic disorders can occur in a population, can happen in an individual just as a new mutation. So it was not there before, but is happening just by its own, just by chance. Okay. So as new mutations, some of these mutations can sometimes happen by chance. So someone was born, they're developing, then at some point a mutation just occurs. None of the parents had it, but it's beginning with that particular individual. So such a mutation that is occurring as a new mutation, it was not in the line, in the genealogy of this individual. Most of the time they are not inherited, but still they will cause disease. Okay, so you can think of, example we give here is the Down syndrome, which is happening when a baby gets an extra copy of chromosome 21. So none of the parents had it, but here the child now gets an extra copy of that chromosome 21. Another way in which these genetic disorders can occur or can happen is through a combination of genes and the environment. So when certain genes change, and after changing, if the lifestyle or the environmental factor where the individual who harbors these genes that have changed is found, the changed genes can now find a way of expressing themselves. Okay? So it's a combination of a gene that changed, a mutation that happened, but then the environment is conducive for the expression of that changed gene, the expression of that mutation. So if the environment is not conducive, then likely the effect of that gene will not be felt. But if the environment favors the expression of that gene, then we'll see the effect being present in the environment. Okay? So the three ways in which these genetic disorders can occur is if they are inherited from parents, if they are occurring just as a new mutation, as a result of chance, a mutation just occurs, and lastly, when it is a combination of genes and the environment. So with that, it means the environment is favoring the expression of that particular mutation. Okay. So what are the types of genetic disorders? So we have single gene disorders. These are happening when there is a change in just one gene. The mutation is just targeting one gene. The example we give, for example, cystic fibrosis. When there is a mutation, when there is a mistake, when there is a change in the gene which makes mucus to be thick and sticky, so then breathing becomes a problem. Okay. In sickle cell anemia, there is a change within this gene that makes red blood cells to have the normal shape. So that the mutation now makes them to have an abnormal shape, curved. Okay? So it's a single gene, just one gene, where the mutation happened, then the disorder resulted. Not a disorder, a mutation in two genes, no, just a single gene. Okay? A change in the sequence of just one gene, then a disease happens. So that is a single gene disorder. Others type include the chromosomal disorder. So this is happening when the mutation is involving a chromosome. Remember the single gene disorder, the single gene mutations, the chromosomal mutations. So when the section that is targeted for the change is bigger, is a chromosome. Okay? So the chromosomal disorders happen when they are either a missing chromosome, an extra chromosome, or a damaged chromosome. Okay? So in Down syndrome, we saw there is an extra chromosome 21. So that is a chromosomal disorder. Okay? By virtue of that extra chromosome, okay, so there is an extra, instead of having the correct number of chromosome 21, an individual with Down syndrome will have an extra copy of chromosome 21. Another example of the chromosome disorders is the Turner syndrome. In Turner syndrome, there is a missing part of either an X chromosome. So you have just an individual with one X chromosome. So X peke yake. Okay. So it happens largely among girls or people of the female gender. So in the Down syndrome, there is a presence of an extra. In the Turner syndrome, there is a missing, there is an absence. Okay. The other type, the third type of genetic disorder, is the multifactorial disorders. So these ones happen because there are changes in multiple genes. Then there is also an influence of either the lifestyle or the environment, factors within the environment. So it means the factors that are causing this disorder are many. That's why it's called multifactorial. Okay? The examples we give for the multifactorial disorders are, for example, heart disease. For you to develop a heart disease, many factors come into play. Genes are involved, diet is involved, exercise, all these play a role in determining the health of your heart. In type 2 diabetes is a mix of the level of genetic risk that an individual has and the lifestyle choices that they make. Okay. So that is a mix of several factors. There are genes, there is a lifestyle choice. Then all of them now interact to affect how the body handles sugar. So it's a multifactorial disorder because there are several factors, many factors that are interacting, leading to the development of such a disorder. The other example of the type is the mitochondrial disorders. When I was teaching you about DNA, we saw that there are DNA which is found within the nucleus or the genome. That's the genomic DNA or the nuclear DNA. But still, we find in animals DNA that is outside the nucleus, so the extranuclear DNA. In animals, we said it is found in mitochondria. Mitochondria are the factories for energy factories for the cell. So the mitochondria also has its own DNA. So if there is a change in some of this DNA within the mitochondria, then it can lead to some disorders. Okay? For example, the Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. So that is caused by a mutation in the mitochondrial DNA that causes sudden vision loss. So there is a mutation in the mitochondrial DNA. Then as a result of that mutation, it leads to an individual suddenly losing vision. Okay? So the examples that we've given for genetic disorders, one is cystic fibrosis. So this is a condition where there is sticky mucus that is building up in the lungs and in the digestive system. So when you have thick mucus within the lungs, it makes it difficult to breathe. Still, when there is a lot of mucus in the digestive system, then the food digestion cannot happen properly. So by virtue of that, then if you mean someone who's suffering from cystic fibrosis will have a problem with breathing because the lungs, the capacity of the lungs has been played about, has been interfered with by the presence of this changed mucus. The other example, sickle cell. These are disorders where red blood cells, which are usually round, change their shape and become like crescents or sickle shaped. Okay? So by virtue of that change, it means one, the red blood cells have changed their shape from being biconcave, so they cannot carry enough oxygen. The surface area imepunguka. by virtue of that change in shape. Okay? So that's why you find out people who have sickle cell need blood transfusion. They need ways to manage pain. Okay? Because with the change in the shape, the sickle-shaped blood cells cannot transport enough oxygen and they can easily block blood flow. So meaning the extremities will not be having enough blood supply. With Down syndrome, that is when there is an extra copy of chromosome 21. Okay? And once that happens, it affects the ability of an individual to develop. So people who suffer from Down syndrome as a result of having an extra chromosome 21 will have intellectual disabilities. And most of them have very distinct facial features. Okay? The Huntington disease. This is a progressive brain disorder that affects movement. It affects thinking and even it affects emotions. But it will usually appear in adulthood. So someone will appear normal, but once upon attaining adulthood, someone suffering from the Huntington's disease will now suffer some of these characteristics. So how is diagnosis and treatment of genetic disorders done? So for diagnosing a genetic disorder is just about trying to find if an individual has a mutation that is causing that disease. Okay. So the first thing for diagnosing is to check whether that individual has that genetic mutation. So the change in the DNA that is making this person to suffer the consequences. That is what we call genetic testing. So you've got to be tested to see if you have a particular mutation that is making you to have the characteristics that you have. So that is the first step in diagnosis for the genetic disorders. The second thing is family history. So most of these genetic disorders, as we saw, one way of them happening is with inheritance. So if you have inherited a genetic disorder, then it means it is within your family. So they have to check whether other people within your family are also portraying the same characteristics, are also having the same characteristics that you are portraying. Okay? So is the disorder that you are suffering, is it running through the family, for example? So that's why it's important to look at the family history. Has someone ever had? Because remember we talked of one of the ways is inheritance. Another thing is a new mutation. So if they find, after doing the genetic testing, they find that you are the only one who has it, but no other person in the family has it, it could possibly be just an occurrence that is new. Okay? Just an occurrence that has happened that is new. So it will be as a result of a new mutation, but not an inheritance. The other thing is now to look at the physical signs of that particular disorder. Okay? So they have to look for signs. Once you have the gene, then do you have the signs as a result of having that gene? Okay. So they have to look at, for example, if you have the gene for a particular disorder, if it is Down syndrome, they now have to look out for those, the features of the face, the development, okay, the blood tests for sickle cell. So the physical examination, the symptoms, do you portray those symptoms? Then the other thing that can happen is the prenatal testing. So prenatal, these are tests that happen before birth. So imagine if you have a particular disorder and you're pregnant. So they will want to test if the baby you are carrying has also inherited that disorder. Okay? So by testing that, by getting a sample from the child in the mother's womb, it's able to look at the genetic makeup of that child and assess if the child is carrying a particular mutation, a particular change. Then you know that if this child has this mutation, chances are that upon birth, the child might either suffer from this genetic disorder or not. So with prenatal testing, inakusaidia kujipanga, kujua kwamba huyu mtoto niko na yeye, akizaliwa kuna uwezekano akuwe na hii ugonjwa na hii ugonjwa na hii ugonjwa. So then you have to put the necessary support that that child will need in place before birth. Okay? You put the necessary requirements, if it's money, if it's getting in touch with the doctor who will help with treating. So prenatal testing is just like a warning. Nakwambia hey, uko pregnant but mtoto naye anaweza kuwa na ugonjwa fulani. And how do you do that? You get a sample from the child, the unborn baby. Then the sample from the unborn baby is now tested. And if the genes and anything else show that that child carries that disorder, then now the parent can prepare, okay, can get enough resources, can move closer to a hospital that has what is needed to support such a child. What about treatment? So there is no cure for most of these genetic disorders. Okay? There is no cure currently, but there are several treatments that can help to manage the symptoms. So there are some medications which can be given to help relieve the symptoms. Kama ni uchungu, utapewa dawa ya kusaidia kupunguza uchungu. Okay? Gene therapy. This one is still in experimental stages because gene therapy is about now correcting the mutation. Okay? So you are trying to fix that faulty gene by replacing or turning it off. Okay? So if a certain gene is not working, there was a mutation which disrupted a particular gene. With the gene therapy, you now target to replace that mutation with the correct sequence. Okay. So it's still a possibility, but bad because of ethical reasons and even financial. There are cases where surgery and other medical procedures can happen. Okay. So if you have physical problems, then people might think of if you have a heart problem as a result of a multifactorial disorder, then possibly doing a heart surgery might help. Okay? So there are ways in which surgeries can be recommended on the basis of which organ is affected as a result of the genetic disorder. There are lifestyle changes and supportive care. So most people who are suffering from these genetic disorders might need to change their lifestyle. For example, maybe you will need a special diet. You will need physical therapy. You will need counseling, okay, so that you know how to adapt to that condition which you cannot cure. When you are eating some special diet, possibly because you have a mutation that does not allow you to digest some particular food. So you'll be told, usikule hii chakula, usikule hii chakula. Okay. So through special diet, then now you can avoid introducing into your body what your body cannot digest. Okay. The other thing is we need regular monitoring. So with the regular monitoring, you just want to check, go for regular checkups so that you can detect complications early. So when you find a complication, then you can deal with it early before it has become a bigger problem. So regular monitoring is just to keep checking and to establish whether there is a problem. Then now you can handle that problem early before it has become bigger, before it has grown into a bigger health challenge. So, for example, people who have a genetic risk for cancer, they will need to undergo regular screenings so that in case cancer is beginning to develop by virtue of their genetic risk, then they can begin treatment early. So through regular monitoring, ni kuangalia tu kuone sababu you have a higher risk to developing a particular disease by virtue of a genetic mutation. Then now you check continuously, regularly, if there are any warning signs for the development of the disease that you have a higher risk towards. So that when that disease begins to develop, then you can get treatment and you seek treatment. Okay. So another thing, because you've said that you cannot cure a genetic disorder. Okay. So then it means there is just a way in which you need to be helped, to be counseled. Okay. So that you understand the genetic conditions that you carry, the risks, and the options that are available for those genetic disorders. So the process in which you can be taken through so that you are helped to understand these genetic conditions, the risks that these genetic conditions pose to you and to the future generations, then the options that you have available concerning those genetic disorders. That service is what we call genetic counseling. So what the genetic counseling does, it just provides knowledge, it provides emotional support, and it provides guidance so that you can make informed health decisions. Through genetic counseling, you'll be told more about the genetic condition that is present, how risky that condition is, and what is the support, which type of support is available. Okay? Then you will now be guided. If, for example, you want to have a family, you'll be told, kama unaoa, jaribu kuoa hivi, kufanya hivi. So that you reduce the chances of transmitting this to your children. Then you have to marry someone who has this particular type of mutation. So that is genetic counseling. And the people who do genetic counseling, the people who offer this service are the genetic counselors. So genetic counselors are healthcare professionals who have a training both in genetics and counseling. Counseling is offering the emotional support. So they must have knowledge in genetics. Then they have now knowledge in how to guide you, how to advise you, how to give you emotional support on the basis of the genetic disorder that you carry. So what help are these genetic counselors to people? So one is the genetic counselors help people to understand genetic conditions. They help people understand these genetic conditions because they explain how these conditions occur. So if you have, for example, Down syndrome, they will explain to you what Down syndrome is, how it occurs, okay, and what it means for your health, or for the health of your child or any other person whom you've taken to seek counsel from these people. So the second thing that they help people do is they help people to assess the risk from that genetic disorder that they carry. So the risk in this case is in terms of how likely is it that this disorder can be inherited. So the future generations, how likely is it that they can inherit that disorder from you? Okay? So you will have an understanding that if I need to have a family, then this is the risk that my child might inherit this particular genetic disorder. The third way through which the genetic counselors help people is they help people to make informed decisions. So once you've been assisted with the knowledge, now it's upon you to determine what to do. So they advise you, then whenever you decide on anything, any action now, you are deciding that action after you have information. So that's what we are calling the informed decision. They've made you to understand, they've explained the genetic condition, you understand it. They've told you how risky it is, you've understood the risk status of that condition. Then now from there they still guide you to make an informed decision. So the decision you make, for example, if you say now no, because of that, sitaki kuzaa watoto, sababu sitaki watoto wapate hiyo genetic disorder. You've made a decision on the basis of information which these genetic counselors gave you. The last way in which they help people is they help people to find support. Okay. So they can connect you with resources. They can connect you with a hospital. They can connect you with a group, a support group. They can connect you with someone who can offer you emotional support. Because they've interacted with many people, they know who might be suffering from the same challenge like you. And through that, you now might be in a position to find more support from such a person. Because such a person will tell you that when I'm going through this challenge, this is how I do. This is what I do to overcome this challenge. So you will have found support. They will connect you to a hospital that will give you a particular test. Because as an individual, you might not know. But these counselors, they will know most likely where you can find a given type of support that you need on the basis of your genetic disorder. Okay? So, genetic counseling matters. It is important because one, it helps with early detection. Okay? And when you know the risks early, then you can help either to prevent or to manage the disorder. Then genetic counseling also helps with family planning. When a couple has been counseled, then they might decide either to have children or to stop having children. Okay? Because maybe you are having children who have a particular disorder. Then once you've undergone genetic counseling, you are told both of you carry this mutation. So on the basis of that information, you will now stop. So it will have helped you to stop giving birth because you know that is you and your partner who carry that genetic mutation, and therefore as you continue giving birth, you are likely to continue bringing forth children who have a particular challenge. Then empowerment. Genetic counseling empowers people. It gives people knowledge. It makes people to know about certain conditions. Then it increases their confidence. Because once you've been empowered, once you've been given information, once you've been taught about a particular genetic disorder, then you are more confident about how you will go to control, how about you will go about taking care of yourself and your current health status by virtue of that genetic disorder. So through genetic counseling you find empowerment, sababu unaelezewa hiyo ugonjwa ni nini, inaletwa namna gani, unaweza itibu namna gani. Okay, so you are provided with all the information that you need about the genetic condition that you are having. Then by virtue of that information, you are now in a better position knowledge-wise. It increases your confidence level about how you can deal, how you can control your health from that particular stage onwards. So the empowerment, the confidence, the knowledge, the ability to control your health was made possible because of genetic counseling. So that is now why we say genetic counseling leads to empowerment. So in conclusion, when we understand genetic disorders and getting accurate diagnosis, then seeking genetic counseling services, all these three can lead to a huge difference within the population. Because when you've understood that someone who has a particular set of symptoms is as a result of a mutation that you have, then you can now go out and begin to get the accurate diagnosis, going to look for the presence of that particular mutation. Then once you confirm that actually there is that mutation through diagnosis, then you can now seek genetic counseling so that you are empowered, you are made knowledgeable about that particular genetic disorder. So through those three, it will help a great deal in managing people who suffer from these genetic disorders. Okay? So whenever there is the right support, again, which is largely obtained through genetic counseling, whenever there is the right care, then anybody who is suffering from a genetic condition, a genetic disorder, or even those who are at risk, which means you have a higher risk of developing that disorder, you can live a healthier life. Okay, so what is key is, do you have the right support? Do you have the right care? Then even if you have that genetic disorder, or you are just at risk of developing that genetic disorder, with the right support and the right care, you can lead or you can live a healthier life just like any other person. Okay? So that's the end of this topic or subtopic of genetic disorders. It is just a continuation of the mutations. So genetic disorders is when there is a mutation and that mutation leads to a deficiency somewhere. So someone eventually now develops a disease, a health condition out of that. The occurrence of it can either be because you are inheriting a mutation, the mutation has developed new, or is an interaction of genes and the environment. Okay? So listen through the video. If you have a question, you know how to reach out. Then we'll meet face to face in our next class. Otherwise, thank you very much.